The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, TechBytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Welcome back to a special spotlight edition of TechBytes, the podcast powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and this week I'm really excited to have a conversation, and let me say, not a first conversation. I'm guessing it might be a third or fourth conversation with Courtney Radke, who is the Vice President of Innovation for Sagenet. So welcome to TechBytes.
Well, thank you for having me. And I think you're right. It probably is the third, fourth, or maybe even fifth. I don't know. It's we've had quite a few over the years.
But I've been your guest before.
You have, absolutely.
At least twice I can think of, because we walk in the same circles, we do the same shows, and it tends to be one of those things that we meet each other on the road.
Yeah, I mean, and inevitably, it's a big ocean, but relatively, is it really? We deal in the same circles. When you're talking about the same technologies, your paths will cross. So I'm happy to be here, as always, chat with you about kind of what's going on in the technology space and food services.
Well, we're gonna be really specific here on this one, because there's clearly a sea of change going on right now. Within the industry, not just food service technology, by the way, but retail, hospitality across the board. And you have spent your career working in innovation, but also in the managed services area, which is being swept up, in this change with all of these new applications coming, and so much has been pushed, to other providers and bringing them together. And I think that really causes a challenge. But before we do that, I probably haven't done you justice here. So why don't you give us a background on your role and also about Sagenet?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're right. I've been in the industry for a while now. I feel like I've come full circle. So I really started in the restaurant industry, focusing on technology, cybersecurity, infrastructure, kind of building the bones of everything that the experiences are built upon. After that, I went into the partner space, really what technology is going into these restaurants. And now I'm on the managed services side. So I get to take all of the feedback from our customers, what they want, where they see the market going. And then I get to help build how that technology goes into the restaurant, actually help solve problems. I do it with an outcome-based approach, not a product or widget-based approach. So it's really interesting how I've got to live all three of those
worlds.
Well,
actually, you don't really own the products and the widgets. You own the service
100%,
here, but you are helping people in the connectivity of putting all of these different products and widgets together.
Well, interestingly, we're not just a hardware deployment company and a managed services company. We actually do have our own services, content management, digital that we build. So we're actually both, right? We get to have our own IP while helping build all of these other bundles around multiple different vendors and products that are out there. So it's a hybrid of most of them. And that's really what Sagenet is, right? So Sagenet's that MSP that kind of does it all, that you may or may not have heard about, and I'm working to change that, right? But it's a 30-year plus old company. And, we are across the US and Canada. We deal a lot in the food service space, quick service restaurant, full service, retail, hospitality, really all of it. And my focus on, in the network and security space from an innovation standpoint is not really to focus on the what is, because I think we get stuck in the what is, how do we fix that? Mine is really about the what can be. What can we take today and move it forward? But where is that forward? What is the next evolution of technology in the restaurants, and how can we get there more quickly and efficiently?
If you think about what you're talking about, and of course you have the word innovation in your title, but you said the next evolution of what's in the restaurants. Well, if we think about that, you have really a dual role. You need to be on top of what's coming, because not everybody is always aware of what's coming. You need to be able to see from your experience in other industries, because sometimes, that's where it comes from. But at the same time, you need to work with the clients on a one-to-one basis to figure out where they are going, because, they change all the time, whether it's geography, they add new concepts, franchise, they each add their own complexities. And of course, applications are just popping up all the time. So, I mean, how do you actually, it is a changing world. How do you see that world?
I mean, it is a double-edged sword. You have that funnel of how do I make sure that I'm keeping up with what's going on today, not necessarily keeping the lights on. I mean, you want to make them brighter, you want to make them more efficient, switch from your old lights into LEDs, that type of stuff. We do have to deal in that space because a lot of the, revolutionary stuff is really evolutionary. It's not really changing a ton. It's just making what you have better, right? There was a lot of technology that went into restaurants. Did it work? Did it not work? Consolidating, converging type of stuff. That's a lot of the order of today. How do we make things better? But then somebody actually threw an analogy at me earlier, and I just kind of loved it. We also have to be in that space of, remember when iPhone, launched the unlock with fingerprint? Well, I never knew I needed that until they gave it to me. And now I can't live without that, or face unlock, right? So we have to be predictive in the market to say, what are these restaurants absolutely not going to be able to live without? And let's build that before they ever know that they need it.
Well, so I mean, the analogy that everybody would probably recognize, and we're sort of tired of hearing this, but obviously the change that people didn't know that they needed to have online ordering, for instance,
Yeah.
And then COVID hits, and you have online ordering, and now it's become actually the opportunity, not the thing that's dragging you back, and with the delivery. So it's the same thing. I think that as restaurateurs in all segments, start getting into the new applications that are available, or they face new challenges like labor and including regulations and things, and they have new payment methods and things that the customers are coming up with, and the international audience is doing. These are things that they didn't anticipate and they didn't think about what the impact would be. Yet what they do is they'll say, we have to put it in now because our competitors are putting it in now, or the customers are telling us they want this. And so you're sort of automatically behind things, but the connectivity and the security, of it has to follow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Look, so, I came from Sonic Drive-In years and years ago. It seems like forever ago, Rob. And we were, at the time working towards, how do I get past service at the speed of sound? Let's predict when they're going to be there, the order ahead. They were set up because, look, every stall was, separated. You could order from those, you could order ahead. The goal was to have your food in 90 seconds once you came in. That was before any of this COVID or anything else. So it was kind of predicting. There was a demand signal. We knew it was going to be needed. So we built towards that. Now, other organizations did that as well, but a lot of them didn't. They didn't see the demand signal. So that's an example of, you got to kind of predict the market. And then if you do that and you do it right, you catch lightning in a bottle, you're ahead. But you're absolutely right that a lot of these organizations have been very, very far behind. And what is that?
Do you want to give us a couple of? And by the way, the examples may in fact come from not the food service industry, but is there lightning in a bottle that's about to strike that you believe in? Let's say the next 6, 12, or 18 months, we need to be prepared for, but we might not be thinking about.
Yeah, well, I think I believe you've talked about it. We've seen it showcased at NRF and a couple other events. We had something similar at NRF where we're really starting to see the use of voice assisted AI ordering and modeling actually coming to fruition. Where a couple years ago it was, I don't really like this. People were very detracted from ordering from a voice. It wasn't very accurate. It wasn't very human. But what we've actually seen is the new models that allows people to order in their own language. It increases speed. And it's not just voice coming into a POS and then somebody's going to type it in. It is from end to end. The entire process is automated.
Okay, but why do I have to be? How does that? Okay, so I agree with you that is something that's coming. But how does that fit into the new world of something I actually need to be thinking about? That's going to have an impact where I have to look at my network and I have to look at, all the different aspects as far as the customer data security, privacy. What am I not thinking about since we know that's coming?
Well, again, that's one implementation of technology that's going to be asking more of your network, of your bandwidth and everything else. Now layer that on to the 20, 30, 40 other things that have gone into your environment in that same time. And if you look at it, a lot of these organizations had to move really quick. They threw a lot of stuff out there. They're deploying things very, very quickly, speed of the customer demand. What they're forgetting is that doesn't come without a price. It's not free, and free meaning it's not free on the network and the demand on your network, both from a bandwidth reliability standpoint, but also from a security standpoint.
Yep. Well, there's going to be a lot more bandwidth requirements, clearly, because anything with voice or video is going to take more bandwidth. And we already
Right.
see that happening. By the way, we see that happening on planes
Oh
because
yeah.
you see the planes now finding they have to do that with the amount of streaming that's going on. I think they gave up the concept of that there's not going to be increased bandwidth, that the people in the seats are going to want to limit it, because they don't. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing we ought to be thinking about, in the hospitality industry, that people aren't going to limit, and they're going to keep coming up with new and new applications that are going to take more bandwidth, speed, but data security as well. And maybe if we layer on top of it the concerns about things like, you're talking about voice AI, but also, generative AI, that's in there, that may be simulating voices and in a call center, or taking orders in a pizza place, that is layered on top of all of it.
Yeah, it all adds up. So look, there's two, going back to what you said. There's two areas here we got to look at. The speed of services is only going to become more scrutinized. The nirvana for us when we launched that mobile app was within 3 seconds, that entire page had to render on a person's phone, pull down the price for that location, pull down their previous orders, social logins, all of that. 3 seconds. That's becoming less and less. Can you imagine sitting in front of your phone and waiting 10 seconds for a mobile order page?
No, you want to know what? Yes, no, I can't. Yes, no, I cannot imagine waiting for it to change. However, a lot of the focus of the voice AI is in the drive-through. Can I imagine holding up the drive-through 15, 20,
Oh
30
my gosh.
seconds?
Yeah,
No, I can't.
exactly.
And I'm not going to make the assumption that the person taking that order is actually going to be located right there in the restaurant.
Right.
So, or
Right.
from my car, I'm driving my car, so no, I cannot imagine that.
Now imagine this, Rob. Imagine that the moment that you've placed that order, whether it's in the drive-through or most likely on a mobile device, web, or something else, and 30 seconds later you get a ding from your bank, or you get an email to say, "Oops, we're sorry, your information has been compromised." Because if these systems are put in quickly, what happens quickly? Well, quickness is the enemy of security. When you have to do stuff fast, in a rush, not planful, it's often at odds with security. So we're now seeing a lot of these systems that are put in. Being attacked. We're seeing generative AI now being used by the attackers to speed up what used to take a month to build an attack campaign now takes minutes. They're able to buy
Quickness
commodity
is the
online.
enemy of security. I have actually just written that down.
Yeah, when you have to do things expediently in a rush, it often erodes the ability to do it securely.
Can
Now,
we say, can we add to that one? Can we say that quickness is the enemy of security, but is also the enemy of efficiency? And it is, you might think that being quick is more efficient, but it is also the enemy of accuracy.
yeah, I think more apt is rushed, because you can do things quickly and efficiently, but if it's rushed, if you don't have a plan, right? I think that's where you start to have those gotchas.
Having the conversation of the difference between fast food and quick service?
We might, right? Semantics, but there is a distinction. And I think that distinction is appropriate here as well. And when I talk about generative AI or AI being used for good, we talked about it there. The use for bad is equally alarming. As I said, the speed at which these attacks are happening, the speed at which they're able to get data and action on that data, how fast it goes out into the dark web, how fast somebody can use that for harm. That's only becoming more quick.
So we have the data security side, but I think if we're also talking about the bandwidth side and the need for speed, here, the one thing that I don't think that people were aware of is, I think it's intuitively obvious. If you're going to do voice or you're going to do video, it's going to use more bandwidth than text. Got that. Okay. But if you go think about it, what I don't think people realized is how much bandwidth, data security, all the other pieces were going to be required when AI came on board. And I actually, quite frankly, never thought about it myself until I started hearing ads on radio and TV, about needing better hosting services because the bandwidth requirements are going out there and getting all that data from all those sources to act quickly, as you've just said. And by the way, what are those sources, which I think is also what you're pointing out to, is something I hadn't thought about was going to increase my exposure.
We're never going to ask less of our network. We're never going to ask for less bandwidth. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of these organizations that are out there, a lot of these restaurants never thought of that before. You say it may just be, elementary for people to think, hey, if I use more voice or I use more video, it's going to use more bandwidth. We've come to this era where it's an embarrassment of riches. Everybody has a phone where they feel like it's just unlimited bandwidth. And that's the same thing that's looked at inside of restaurants.
Am I writing that down too?
You should look, these are quotes to live by, right?
I get that. No, I get that. And we don't think about that. And that's why we are constantly increasing the amount of memory and speed in the next version of the phone. It's why you go ahead and you update your phone every year. That whole idea of 3 years or waiting the 2 years does not work.
Right.
Because of what you have. If we can just take a pause for a second, we'd like to just transition and we'll just take a quick break here, and then we're going to transition into some other areas of focus here that maybe people haven't thought about.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
Okay, well, we're back, and we have Courtney Radke with us, who's the Vice President of Innovation with Sagenet. And we're having this conversation about, I think it's really about the things that people haven't actually considered when it comes to their managed network services and the other services that surround it. I was curious, if we were having this conversation, we probably did, but 5-10 years ago, we might be having a conversation saying, do people actually get it? Does if you're in a franchisor or franchisee, do the franchisees get it because you want them to invest in technology and in security? What is your take on that? Do they get it that there's so much more there that they intuitively? I love the phone analogy, by the way.
Yeah.
Do they actually get it because they have that phone and they recognize that they go ahead and they have to have more and more and more? Do they get it?
I think it becomes pretty obvious now, Rob. They get it, but with the phone analogy, that's one thing in your hand that you can replace every couple of years, and you do because new features are available. But how often is that infrastructure replaced inside of a restaurant? I'll tell you, it's not often. Nor really should it be. It's getting to the point where if you make the right investments now, it should be a long-lived asset that's in those environments for 5, 7, or longer years. Now,
are we serious? I don't quite get that one, because I've been telling people that maybe 3 years at most, but you just went back to 5, 7 years, which is the traditional method of how you're going to go ahead.
I'm not saying should, I'm saying can, right? And so they can live with it, but if the market dictates that there's another feature or function or their business has to change, they find out very, very quickly that their infrastructure doesn't support it. The terms that I use are, the network was always looked at as it's just going to be there, right? It was looked at as traditional. It was looked at as legacy. What I'm trying to do, and what I think is catching on in the market, and you can help me with this, is network and connectivity needs to be looked at as foundational. And foundational meaning that it's at the bottom. It's the base. It's that cornerstone that every other experience, every other thing that you try to throw at your restaurants is built upon. So if you don't have a strong foundation, what happens? It crumbles. So you find out very, very quickly when you did not make the right investments. If there are reasons to replace certain functions every 3 years, we need to make it easier to do so. The problem with infrastructure is it's not fun traditionally to go replace all of it. It's becoming easier, more modular, more service-based now, where you didn't have it when we had this conversation.
It is so funny. The foundational piece that you're talking about, in years past, if I were to try to give the analogy here, I would say, hey, I started my career as a restaurant manager, and if your pilot lights went out, you couldn't cook and you were shut down. Then over time, it transitioned to, you've got credit cards, you got music, you got all these things that are coming. This is before we went to cloud-based point of sale, but those things were outside and we were, headed in that direction. Oh, if you lose your connectivity, you're out of business. Now
Right.
you've got all your operations going there, and I'm sure it's intuitively obvious that you have your point of sale, your back office are being hosted elsewhere.
Uh-huh.
So your data, your scheduling, your payroll. Okay, if you're down, you're out of business. But what they're not thinking about is the new things that are coming. For instance, NRF this past year, when you start looking at the smart kitchen and connected buildings where every piece of equipment's now on the network, you are really down,
Right.
because it's down to the ice machine that doesn't have ice in it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more connectivity than we really thought about before, but people maybe are taking it for granted. I'm not sure. And that's not even talking about the customer connectivity, because I think that one's assumed.
Well, 100%. Everything inside of our restaurants is becoming more intimately connected because we want to drive those personal experiences for the customer. Everything is IoT based. There's a sensor in everything. I just saw an article about that of cloud-based everything was a great idea when everybody thought that the internet was always available, and it simply isn't. Right? There's always outages everywhere. I've been hit by multiple ISP outages at my home and my businesses, and so the need for resilient, redundant connectivity. We've talked about SD-WAN before. We've talked about a lot of those things that were nice to haves before, but they're need to haves now, because think about what offline business was several years ago. You could batch some transactions. You could have your pre-authorization amounts. But now with the rise in theft and some of the other things, a lot of organizations are saying, I can't have any pre-authorization. Maybe not so much in food, but we're seeing this in larger goods stores, that they've removed the ability to do pre-authorizations and batching, meaning if they are not online, they are not doing
But you
business.
have to have the payment industry working along with you on that one too.
Agreed. Yes, absolutely.
So are they changing?
There are yes. I mean, because when we're seeing these laws coming out, new cybersecurity laws in particular, of shifting responsibility to the merchants. Now we're having these back and forth games, or not necessarily games, but conversations between the retailers, the vendors, the merchants, and the merchant providers and the credit card providers, in that who is going to be responsible when these breaches, when these thefts occur. And so,
let me ask you, hang on a second. But we also are seeing consolidation in the marketplace, where many of the financial and credit card processors are bringing forward, point of sale. So Shift4, you got Square out there, you got people like Toast, that are backed on that. So does that reduce the risk, or are they taking the risk now? Because I always remember when there was when there would be a breach, the first thing the operator does is they blame the POS company, right?
Right.
So is that shifting now in who has the responsibility? Is that responsibility, in fact, embedded in the systems that you're buying?
I think what it goes back to is what I dealt with when I was coming up as an engineer. It's now we just always blame the network. It's starting to be that we're putting in these stipulations that you must be this tall to ride this ride, instead of just putting in a POS system or an implementation of POS. Some of these things have to be in place first: resilient networks, redundant networks, security controls in place, so that we're reducing the likelihood of an event. I think that's really what we're talking about. Things are going to happen, but we're trying to get to the point where we reduce the likelihood of things up front instead of dealing with them after they happen.
Well, that's right. And that really it's the upfront piece, because after, you can't control it. Afterwards, it goes viral.
Oh, and it's so much
very
more
hard to
expensive to
control. So
fix.
you really have to do the preventative maintenance. Do you think that operators are understanding that there's a cost to this, or are they looking at this cost as being embedded in something else?
Well, I think they want it to be embedded in something else. What I'm finding in talking with a lot of customers and a lot of people out there is they want a comprehensive technology fee. And we built something like this out at Sonic as well, where it's a technology fee that, as your business has evolved, as the market changes, and we need to implement new technologies and services to meet that demand, cost for technology is going to go up. So we need a way to fund that. And not everybody wants to shell out a X amount of money, every couple of years to do a refresh. What they really want is what I'm, trying to move towards is this as a service model: your technology as a service, your network as a service, your security as a service. So essentially, I mean, as you know it, everything's going to a subscription fee. And a lot of organizations want that OpEx model.
Is it going to be subscription fee, or are we heading towards the evergreening of systems? Because I know people tried it, then they didn't try it. Are we getting there where you make your relationship with the suppliers and they just take responsibility and evergreen it?
I think we're getting closer. I don't think we had the ability to really, really do it before, because like any good idea, when it actually launches, it's 5 years too early. And so we were way too early before in the market where it wasn't actually possible. I think it's becoming more possible, but in a measured way. We learned from what didn't work before. And now we're able to create this hybrid approach to say, look, everything's not going to be virtual. Everything's not going to be as a service. As much as it can be and as it makes sense, let's do that. But let's do it in a way that takes account for the traditional long-lived assets, the hardware that's actually running these stores, and as a service it as possible.
Well, yeah. But I think that people start to, recognize and see that, and so they see those as viable options. So at the end of the day, do you believe that even the services that are offered by Sagenet may in fact be packaged in by other providers, or do you see, the operators, recognizing that it's a standalone service that they need to have?
So what I think it is standalone services from different providers, but it's done in such a way that we as Sagenet work with some of the other providers that they have and build that ecosystem. I've talked with you about this before, about building those platforms, right? So that we directly integrate with the other providers via API or something else, so that
But is that behind the scenes?
It is behind the scenes. It should be transparent. I mean, they should know that it's happening. They should make sure that the investments are made with partners that have those direct integrations, that use open API frameworks. But to the operators and to the customers, it should be 100% transparent. They just know that from end to end, their transactions are working, the network is up, and they are secure because it's all part of a single ecosystem. There may be multiple players in there, but all of them are working together.
But you see a lot of startups and a lot of new innovation going on. Sometimes the technology actually comes from people who are in the business, who say they see a need, they create something. Sometimes it's people from outside the business. I see a lot of startups by Google engineers, who decide that they have a great idea because they drink at a bar somewhere and they sit on the bar and they say, we need to do this.
Sometimes ideas happen there, but yeah.
That's true. But do you find that intuitively, given the platforms today for building applications, whether they're custom or whether somebody's doing, a new innovation, as a company, do they intuitively build in those APIs and build in and have an understanding that they need to have these connection points? Or do you find people just sort of do it and they're really not thinking about the ecosystem of how they plug in with everything else?
They're absolutely thinking about the ecosystem because they have to. Because as you mentioned, those startups, those disruptors that showed that it can be done a different way, took business away from the big ones that are out there. And you either get on board, a lot of times they buy those other companies, or you just understand that this is where the market's going. So I would say they're being mindful about building platforms together inside of an ecosystem versus, hey, I'm just going to do it all by myself. And if you don't like it, what other options do you have? Rob, as you know, there's a lot of options.
There are a lot of options that are out there, but that's one of the problems. It's a problem for those who come up with new, but it's also a problem because each industry segment, whether it's convenience store, whether it's general retail, whether it's restaurants, whether it's hotels, each one seems to have its own set of standards and how they want to work and integrate with each other. Do those get in the way? Because I don't see people like, perhaps, to throw them out there, like RTN or HTNG or Connexus. I don't necessarily see them sharing data and working together today, even though I'm trying to get them to do that. And I know you work with many of them. So does that create a layer in there, or, how does that work between industries?
Yeah. So I think between industries, I think maybe a couple years ago it was different, but we as a company subscribe to RTN's open API framework, and I know a lot of other organizations, including restaurants, do. So I think opening the doors for open collaboration, and the reason that it wasn't done before is because nobody consolidated it, nobody put something together, and I think that by sharing that information, we're only as smart as the sum of all the people around us, and so we need to make sure that we're using that. I think it's gotten a lot better, actually. I think a lot of the big organizations that are out there really need to drive that change, and they are. They're seeing that as their customers want this. It's a need that they have. And yes, there are a lot of other options out there. And the only reason somebody goes to another option is because who they're currently with isn't providing them what they need, isn't innovating as quickly as they need to. So I find that the industry has room for improvement, right? But there has been a lot of movement over the last several years for that, to build these standards, to build these collaborative standards that are out there, to give a conduit for restaurants and partners to work together to say, this is the baseline that we have. Let's all build towards that. Is there
Well,
room for
and I
improvement?
do see that.
Absolutely.
I take what you said earlier about the foundation, that you start. This is the basic foundation. Maybe before the basic foundation was connectivity in general, right?
Right.
But now they know that this is the foundation. So maybe that is a good reason why they think about it before it's there. Um, just some additional thoughts, because I think you've really given us a number of key ideas here. The need for speed, but also what speed does as it relates
Mhm.
to security, efficiency, and also accuracy. Those two of the three are my words that I'm adding into your list that are
Fine.
there. And so I get that, but what's next? I mean, so you've mentioned some new technologies, especially the voice area that's hot. That's
Mhm.
next, but what's next in your specific area?
Yeah, and so it would seem like we've heard about 5G forever now, but it was really never super viable for restaurants as we talk about the need to get connectivity out there. And honestly, in that same vein, satellite connectivity has become hugely resurgent, right? We've seen the stuff that Starlink has
Well, why am
done.
I having a deja vu moment?
We've
No,
talked
because
about it.
I'm picturing different networks that were selling satellites, especially in the gas station
Yeah.
industry and C store, and then it went to the backups, and they talked about the 5G, and they talked about other things, but so you're now saying that the satellite thing is coming back around.
Resurgence there, and now creeping up on the horizon, Rob, is 6G networks, is
I was going
is
to ask.
Wi-Fi 7. Like, we're already there to the point where we have to start talking about it. It's not actually going to be viable for several years, but we have to start taking that into account of what is the next generation of connectivity. Now, when I have more bandwidth available to me than ever before, am I going to use it efficiently, or am I going to do what a lot of organizations have always done, is try to squeeze so much into a small pipe and not use it efficiently,
Well,
right? Everything's just,
more bandwidth, smaller form factor, higher power, because all this requires power.
yeah,
Mobile devices for sure.
right.
And so you could be right. I mean, I think about those satellite phones, how bulky they are. I also think about watches, right? And
Yeah.
now I have a traditional watch, but the traditional watch I have actually has GPS in it, and it sets itself automatically when I travel because it connects to satellites. But if
Look
I
at
have enough
you.
satellites out there, I have enough power in my watch, you know, and I have a smartwatch, let's say, that's getting it, then all of a sudden, there's a lot more, coming through, that channel in mobile devices.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think what we'll find is restaurants will be both more optimistic, but also more cautious to jump into those new things because they saw what some of these technologies that were touted 5 years ago are going to bring to their business. And we're only just now seeing them really come into their own. So they're going to become more technically aware of what's coming, but also more measured in how does this actually fit into the larger scale of me moving forward with my business.
Well, that also becomes back to, they have only so much ROI,
Right.
and, they're going to take a look at what's, the something of a service, as an operating expense versus, the capital expense of what they have to put in for the infrastructure, which, by the way, it would be pleasing to think that it might actually, I know you didn't say it should be 5 to 7 years, but it might be 5 to 7 years in infrastructure and a platform that they can build on, which
Right.
is great. That is great. So, I think they do have to balance it because nobody has unlimited pieces. And today the challenge is, how much do I actually put in because everything has its own cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, look, you could have all of the benefits you could ever want with none of the risks if you had unlimited money and unlimited time, but that's not what we have.
Time,
So
money, and resources. Nobody always has all three. They can have two, but they can't have three.
wonderful.
It
Yep,
doesn't work that
exactly.
way. Well, listen, I really want to thank you, for joining us today and really spotlighting, Courtney, you and Sagenet, really spotlighting what people should think about, but also not just what they should think about, but they really do need to do and invest in because of the future which is adding so much to it. And I'm not so sure that people always think about this, but it is foundational. I'll that word foundational, I think, works very well here. And there are new challenges coming, but those new challenges are brought about not just by new technology, but new connectivity. Things like the totally connected environment and the kitchens and everything else that's there. So I want to thank you, for really highlighting that. And I get the feeling, I'm sure this won't be the last conversation that we have together on that.
I hope not. The industry is always changing. I'm happy to kind of give a peek into what's the future. Some of it is the right now that we can take advantage of. It doesn't have to be scary. Be agile, take risks, right? And there's lots of good partners out there that can help kind of sift through what is out there today, make sure that you're making the right investments, whether it's for 3, 5, or 7. And I got you to use my word. You've said foundational, so it's going to catch on.
I got it. Well, you gave me a few other words to use as well here. And all I can say is that tag, you're it. And the next one is on you. So maybe I'll be joining you again on the floor of one of the shows.
You got it.
Well, great. So this podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of technology within the food and beverage industries, providing thought leadership, along with our partners like Sagenet and Courtney, as a single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. Bottom line, the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share. So thank you for joining Courtney and me on this episode, this spotlight episode of TechBytes, powered by the IFBTA and Sagenet. I am Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.